Hello and welcome. My name is John Dickinson. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how I created this look using Cinema 4D and After Effects together with Boris Effects Sapphire and Continuum. So let's get started. Now obviously this entire look is based around this text, which is the hero, and I created this text setup in Cinema 4D. So let's start here and I'll just walk you through what I did. First thing was to model the text. I actually used an image from the internet that I found based on the announcement of Wakanda Forever. Just turn this off and we can see that better. A really nice shiny text. It's got a great look. It's got this interesting pattern here. I thought that'd be a fun one to model and texture. And just come back to this view here. It's broken into two parts. I modeled the text first, and the good thing about poly modeling text like this is you can create proper connections between the text, and you can get really good edge flow. So when you do the final render, you get really nice bevels, and these sort of tight corners all work really well. Trouble with beveling extruded objects is you can get some bad corners and bad edges, and things can overlap, and when you get up close it's not a good look. So it does take a little bit of time to poly model something like this, but the end results are really great. I split out the pattern as a separate object, so that was created really simply, and just used a bevel around the edges just to put a nice little bevel on there. Having it separate like that just made it more flexible. I didn't have to, connect anything to the main text objects. I basically overlapped that stuff. You could never tell, so it was much more flexible to create that as a separate object. So once the text was modeled, then it was taken across to Risum UV for unwrapping. And once it was unwrapped, it was taken across to Substance Painter for texturing. Let's quickly go across to Substance Painter. I'm not going to stay in here very long. I just want to walk you through just the basic setup. There's the UVs there. They were all done in Risum UV, as I mentioned. And let's just zoom into the text. So we've got these sort of nice shiny side bevels. And we've got this front layer, which is underneath the pattern, and that's slightly blue. On top of that, we've got a duplicate of that, where I've just removed some of the blue. You can see these are fairly rough, not as shiny as these bevels, so the bevels really pop out. On top of that, we've got a little bit of chrome dirt, so a little bit of occlusion, a little bit of dirt, but not much at all, because this is supposed to be Wakanda and everything is very modern and new and clean. And I definitely didn't want to get a sort of grungy look going on, but I didn't want to have it sort of perfectly clean either, because they get into gritty battles and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a combination of clean and slightly weathered, I guess. On top of that, we have a little bit of roughness. Just applying a little bit of overall roughness. You can see these sort of areas here and here. And this is the great thing about modeling text and unwrapping it and using the UVs. In my past, working in motion graphics, I did a lot of 3D text, and I always used cubic mapping because I didn't know how to model text, and I certainly didn't know how to unwrap text. But it's quite liberating now to know how to do both, and to know that you're going to get really good texture placement. I don't have to hide the sides of the model because the texture's stretched, for example. So I can look at the text from any angle, and I know that my UVs are good and my textures are going to be sitting perfectly and not stretched. It's really nice for text. Surprisingly, this is the first full text I've actually sub-D modeled. On top of that, we have just a little bit more overall roughness. You can see when I turn that on and off. Just a little bit of roughness. This tends to disappear under the lights in Redshift in Cinema 4D. It seems fairly strong here in Substance Painter. Once I get it under the lights in Redshift, it doesn't seem quite as strong. So the thing is to find that balance. So the next step was the lighting, and the lighting's pretty straightforward. I started with one of the Grayscale Gorilla Pro Studios metal HDRIs. Let me just move the render view out of the way, and I'll just turn off the other lights. So the Grayscale Gorilla HDRI really got me most of the way there. I actually used this particular image here, GSG Pro Studios Metal 19 from the Pro Studios Metal Pack. And that gives me these lovely details, especially in these curved areas. But because that's a black and white HDRI, I decided to use some Redshift area lights to add some color. You can see I've named them here. There's a cool blue light on the right-hand side. Let's turn that on. You can see it's being picked up in the sides, certain areas. Let me just move back a bit. I'll just move this over. I haven't got much screen real estate here. There we go. You can see it's being picked up in the sides of this Black Panther text and up here. A few other areas down there. Turn the next one on. This is cool left. A few more areas that it's being picked up. Around here, top of there. And also this warm front top. Adding a bit of warmth. Starting to be picked up in the bevels around here. You can see how those warm and cool lights, they're not really illuminating the text. They're just adding a bit of color variation and just pinging off these bevels. And warm front bottom, just to add a bit of warmth down here. You can see how that's really picked up in these bevels here. And if I turn off the dome light, you can see they're not doing a whole lot. By themselves, they wouldn't be enough to illuminate that text. But in combination with the HDR on the dome light, I'm getting a really nice illumination, picking up all the key bevels and making this highly readable as well. So that's the lighting. Let's take a look at the animation. I'm just going to turn the render view off. Now I broke this down into 4 different shots. I wanted to do the old classic technique where you reveal parts of the letters and then on the last shot pull back to reveal the entire Wakanda Forever text. The setup is basically a null object with a series of cameras inside the null. Some of them are in their own null objects. The first camera I set up was this camera 04, which is the one we're looking through now. And I wanted to have the text kind of pull back into position. And I'm not animating the text, I'm actually keyframing the camera null or the main camera null. Let's come into the side view and you can see how all of the cameras are moving back. Just select that null. You can see there's the motion path. So that's just animating back on the z-axis. And the text itself, other than the bend deformer, is completely stationary. So really simple. So once I set up camera 4, I went ahead and I created new cameras, dropped them into a null object because I find it easier to position cameras using a null. So if we go to camera 1, see I've positioned that there, like that. If we just come here, I find the camera's easier to control just by making it a child of a null and then modifying the heading, pitch, and bank of the null rather than the camera. So that camera is up to the top left of the text. Camera 2 is over on the right looking up at the text. And then camera 3 is in front of the text and just slightly elevated looking down. You can see them here. So camera 1, camera 2, and camera 3. And the cameras themselves aren't animated. And then the idea, of course, is to render out a second or so of camera 1, 2, and 3 as the main null's moving back, and then cut to camera 4, this one here, which reveals the text at the end. So while that animation is happening, the text is unbending. Now the bending is created using a bend deformer. Just twirl up the lights here, and you can see I've got my bend deformer in there. If I just turn that off. Now the benefit of actually modeling text is that when you use a deformer, you're going to get really nice clean results. That's not always possible when you're using, say, splines and an extrude object. But the bend deformer's strength has been animated. So we start with a strength of 50, and then at the end of the animation, that's down to 0. Now there are 2 bend deformers here. I just felt that with camera 3, because we're looking right at the middle of the text, you can't really see much of the bend happening. So I decided that I was going to use a separate bend deformer, just a duplicate of this one, with a slightly higher bend. You can see it's 90%. This makes it feel more bent at this point. And then when we cut to, sorry, not camera 1, camera 4, obviously that's way too bent. It feels like it's one continuous move and the camera's just cut to a different angle. And that's the kind of look that I was going for. So that wasn't quite enough bend for camera 3, but it's just right for camera 4. And vice versa. If I turn that one back on, way too much for camera 4, but better for camera 3. We just weren't getting enough bend. Okay, now the only other thing that I did in here to take across to After Effects were some tracking spheres. Now what do I mean by tracking spheres? I'll show you. Let's come to, we'll do camera 4 first. So based on the guide image, we've got these little glints on the edges of the text, and I really like that. So I knew immediately that I wanted to use Sapphire lens flare, specifically the auto track version of the effect, to add some glints that move along the text. And there's a few different ways you can do this. You might want to do some tracking in After Effects. I think that's probably a little bit more difficult than the technique that I chose, which is to create some highly luminant spheres. And let me just turn the camera off. I'm going to turn the lights off as well so we can see what's going on here. And I'll also turn the cameras off. Let's just hide those. Turn these on. So I added some spheres. I'll turn the bend deformer off. Onto the edges of the text. And what have we got here? We've got the W. You can see I've also keyframed the position of those spheres. If I just move my time indicator. And then moving along the edges of the text. You can see I've put one down here on the F. Move like that. And there's a few placed. One there, one there, one there, and one there. And if we just turn the text off and the pattern, you can see they're all animated. Now, what I did in After Effects was use Lens Flare Auto Track to track those dots. And that worked really well. I initially considered using null objects and then trying it that way. But null objects don't work with deformers. Check this out. Just turn on the deformer again. You can see with the W selected, we can see the original, but because the spheres are nested under the null, and that's nested under a second null with the bend deformers, the sphere's position is being affected as well. So that those spheres are sitting rock solid to that text. Let's just turn the text back on. Roll in here. See how that sphere is recognizing the bend deformer? That doesn't happen with null objects. Null objects won't recognize the deformers, so the null would just sit here. And even if I was to use a null object, I still need something for Lens Flare Auto Track to track anyway, so it makes perfect sense to use a sphere or some other kind of geometry in this situation and not a null. So each of the different camera views have their own spheres. Let's just go to camera 1, and I'll just turn off these ones and turn on camera 1. And turn on camera 1's sphere. There it is. See, that's the top of the A, and camera 2 on the D there, and camera 3. Got one on the R down the bottom, and we've got one on the N over here. So a couple on camera 3. So once everything was set up, then that was rendered out. Obviously, I rendered the text using the Redshift renderer, but the spheres were just rendered using Cinema 4D's renderer because they just have a simple luminance material on them. And those were imported into After Effects for compositing. So let's whip across to After Effects now and see how the composite was set up. To do the composite in After Effects, I started with shot 4, which is the final Wakanda Forever reveal. And you can see there's a bunch of different layers in here. There's a few shape layers making up the background, and there's these flares using lens flare auto track, and there's also some adjustment layers as well. So let's break down this shot, and then what we'll do is come over to shot 3. You can see this shot's clean. We'll go step by step by duplicating layers, and we'll build up this shot. So by the end of this part of the tutorial, you should have a good idea about how this is done in After Effects. All right, so let's start off with the text itself. I'm just going to select that and solo it. Make sure we can see it. Now there is 2 layers. My initial render was like this, and after I'd rendered it, I was playing around with some of the warmer lights, and I did like that look as well. So what I ended up doing was rendering that and bringing both of them into After Effects and then just masking out the bits I didn't like. So this is a combination of 2 different renders. You can see in this top render, this is the light setup I showed you in Cinema 4D, where that warm lower light is pinging off of these bevels. My original render didn't have that. You can see it's a little more dull. So I just added a couple of masks to this top layer just to keep the bits that I did like in that second render and reveal the parts that I liked from that first render. So the combination of these 2 actually looks really nice. You've got some nice blue highlights on the sides and also these nice golden highlights, which I think really makes this text look a lot better. So that's the text. Let's look at the background, and then we'll take a look at the flares. So I'm going to double click this comp here to open it up, zigzag thick cam 4. Now the front of the text has the zigzag pattern, so I decided to explore that for a background. And I've made a custom background here using shape layer strokes. Just move my time indicator. You can see these are actually animated. And there's a number of them here. Let me just solo one of them. Maybe one we can see that's in the middle. There we go, this one here. Okay, so if I press UU on the keyboard just to reveal the change parameters. So this is a shape layer path. My path there. And if I need to, I can just select the endpoint and change the length. And it also has the zigzag modifier applied. If I click on add, you can see there's a zigzag there. And creating the zigzag shape this way means I don't have to add multiple points to the path and just drag it out manually. Really fast way to do it. I can change the size, and I can also change the amount of ridges, which is really nice. So what I ended up doing was just duplicating that a whole bunch of times. You can see I've set a couple of position keyframes. So this one is sliding to the right. I just duplicated it and had them sliding left and right and just changed the color of them slightly. Just select them and type in COL. You can see some of them are sort of this pale teal. There's a few darker ones and a few down the bottom here that are slightly desaturated. Just playing around with different colors and different movements until I got this sort of crossing zigzag lines, which is a nice base for a background. You can also see that there's a camera in here and a spotlight. Just turn those off. So without the spotlight, you can see it looks fairly flat. And with the spotlight, see we're creating a kind of a vignette here. Now, what's this camera? This is camera 4 from Cinema 4D. If I hit the U key, you can see there's all the baked position keyframes. I'll quickly come back to the main comp we'll talk about the camera now. There's one for camera 3, one for camera 2, and one for camera 1 down here. So I've imported the cameras from Cinema 4D. And here in Cinema 4D, up here you can see there's a little icon I've put in my palette. And this is the icon for the AEC4D Pro plugin, which you can grab from aescripts.com. And for me, this is the fastest way to get cameras and other objects across from Cinema 4D to After Effects. All I have to do is click the button, and it recognizes I have 4 cameras in here. So I just select those. I can click Export Layers, and that will whip across to After Effects and drop my cameras in. You can see it's also put this W in here because I had an external compositing tag on that W layer. I don't need that. So there's all my cameras. So that's how I brought them across to After Effects. It's easy as that, just a 1-button click. And I've copied and pasted the camera 4 into this pre-comp with the zigzag because I want these zigzag lines to move with that camera move. You can see that camera is pulling back in the Cinema 4D scene, and that means that the zigzag lines are moving away from us. And of course the spotlight, again, just to create that sort of vignetted effect. So that's zigzag thick cam 4. And I'll just turn that on and just turn off these 2 layers. On top of that is a shape layer stroke. And that's also using zigzag. This one hasn't been pre-composed. So once again, there's a single path and it's using zigzag, but this one's also using a repeater. I click on add again, you can see there's repeater. So the repeater has 56 copies, and that just fills up the comp with strokes. If I just bring this down, you can see they just disappear. You just zoom in a bit. There you go. You could animate that as well if you wanted to. Just a nice quick way to populate your composition with shape layers. Now, one thing you may also notice is that there's a bit of offset happening here when the stroke hits the hard line of those thick zigzags. And that's done using a displacement map. Click on Effect Controls, there's Displacement Map. And you can see the Displacement Map layer is Zigzag Thick Cam 4. We turn that off. That's how it looks. And it's pretty, pretty vanilla, pretty boring. Turn it on, and we get that really nice displacement. So I like that kind of thing because it just makes the background a little more interesting. It makes the movement a little more irregular. It feels like the background is displacing or refracting the foreground. Just a real cheap, easy way to create more interest in your backgrounds. Now, while we're looking at the background, you'll obviously notice these dots, and I haven't mentioned that yet. That's a bit of treatment I did for Zigzag Thick Cam 4. Let's turn that off again. So there's a couple of continuum effects I've used here. If we turn that off, there's the background as we saw it in the pre-comp. Now I've used BCC LED, a nice quick way to convert your After Effects layers to LED lights. And I like that look, but it was a little too extreme. So what I did was I used BCC Composite on top, and the mix layer is Zigzag Thick Cam 4. So I'm mixing the original layer back with the LED version, and I'm using the overlay blend mode. So that's nice. It doesn't make the LEDs too obvious. They're almost invisible on the dark areas. But once again, it just adds an extra bit of detail, extra bit of interest. It's nice how it kind of bleeds across. These darker ones bleed across into the lighter area. I just like that look. You can see it's also a bit of bleed across there too. So just adding a couple of continuum effects to this to get that looking even better. And with the zigzag lines on top, it gives you this really nice background. And the zigzag lines aren't animated, but they are being displaced by the background, so it kind of feels like there's some animation in the zigzag lines. So far we have the 2 background layers and we have the hero text, just like that. Now earlier I mentioned that I knew I wanted to have those little tiny flares that follow along the edges of the text to replicate what I saw in the guide image. But I also thought that I could use those flares to reveal parts of the background, because at the moment this background kind of looks a bit flat, looks a bit geometric. It doesn't really feel like it's suitable for this look, but only revealing the background in the areas where the lights are, where the flares are, makes it look much better. So I'll show you what I mean. First of all, we'll actually have a look at the flares. So I've got this lens flare front layer. Turn that on and there's my flares. Hit the U key and you can't see any keyframes. That's because these are Sapphire lens flare auto track lens flares. And remember, in the Cinema 4D section of this tutorial, I talked about those tracking spheres. Let me just turn this off and just turn these off. There's those tracking spheres. So just luminant white spheres rendered out on a black background, and they're perfectly aligned as I demonstrated in Cinema 4D. Now, I've actually applied lens flare twice. The top layer is my modified version. Here's the original effect. So that's how it looks with the default setting. So I thought we could quickly go into the lens flare editor and see how I made some adjustments to that. So if I come down to Edit Lens and click that, that's going to open up the Flare Designer. And I can click with my cursor and move that around. And I want to make some really minor adjustments to this, basically just turning stuff off. Because these are not so much flares as they are kind of little glints that move along the text. So really important to remove any of these smudges and rings and all these unnecessary parts. I'm just going to turn all of those off. Those as well. That's looking much better. So there is the hotspot. It probably does need the rays as well. But what I want is one long horizontal ray. So if I come up and click Add Rays, that's going to add rays down the bottom here. And in my properties, I can make some adjustments. So I only want one ray, and I want to change the rotation. So I'll just bring that round like that. It's probably a little too thick, so I'll just decrease the ray thickness. Let's see, probably just the size. Yep, that'll make that a little longer. And just a little stretch, and that'll sort of feather it a little bit on the end. So something like that. And click OK, and we're going to check this out. And you can see how all of the flares have changed. So I probably want to come now and, increase the brightness and something like that, but then decrease the scale. Something like that. So that gives you more of a glinty look. So I'll just turn those off, and I'll just come back to my originals, which are almost identical, which is terrific. Means I'm hopefully doing it right. Let's bring the text back, and I'll bring the background back. Okay, you can already see how the glow from those flares it seems like it's illuminating the background somewhat. And that's what gave me the idea to sort of exaggerate that and make a really nice large area of fall off that actually does illuminate the background. So as these follow these tracking markers along, then the background gets illuminated in that area as well. So to do that, all I did was duplicate my lens flare layer, and let's just solo this, and just once again adjust the settings. You can see I've pretty much turned everything off except for large glow and blue glow. Just creating a nice big soft glow. And now if we come back and turn on these background layers, you can see that we're getting a slightly more illuminated area where these large soft lens flares sit. And that's happening because if I just toggle switches and modes, we have lens flare back set to the add blend mode. Make that normal, then it gets a little flat, but with add, it brightens up those areas. But with the text on top of that, you can see we're getting a brighter result in these areas, bigger, softer, brighter area. Just turn on the front lens flares, and we'll look at the particle illusion layers in a moment. First of all, I'm going to come up and I'm going to turn on this film effect adjustment layer. This is Sapphire film effect. You can see that darkens everything right down. And now that really exaggerates this sort of illumination effect. See how it's really quite bright around these areas, and it falls into darkness quite quickly. So I wanted that zigzag look, but I didn't want it all over the background. I just wanted it really subtly. So it's a really nice little enhancement to this rather than some really obvious sort of wallpaper but sitting behind the text. And it works in nicely with this sort of zigzag shape on the text. Just beneath that we have the Ultra Glow effect. Sapphire Ultra Glow. Pretty much use it in all of my After Effects projects now, just to give that nice big soft glow. You can see I've used a teal for the primary glow just to add a bit more color in there. It kind of enhances that blue metal that I showed you in Substance Painter. And the afterglow is also a bright blue. Now the dust effects were created using particle illusion. Let's launch particle illusion and take a look. And this is where having Boris Effects Master Suite really comes in handy, because Sapphire itself doesn't have a particle generator, but because I have the Master Suite, I can use Continuum, which does have a variety of different particle effects, including particle illusion. So for this, I've used a preset that I've created that's going to be released soon called Nebula. Just type that in. This is this one here. We just click on the preview. So it's a nice big area emitter with plenty of turbulence in there, with the auto evolve speed just moving those particles around in a really organic way. So I use that as my starting point. You could also use one of the 2021 emitter presets, something like Turbulence Tester. That's pretty much the same thing as a starting point. All I've done is come in and reduce the number of particles. Just press play. And increase their life slightly. The other really important thing is that these are 3D particles. So this emitter is set to 3D. And currently it's using the After Effects camera. So we'll go back to After Effects and take a look at that. We've already talked about importing the camera, and I can take advantage of that with Particle Illusion's 3D features in After Effects by coming up and choosing Use Comp Camera. And we already saw how in the background comp we have a copy of the camera, and having the camera in this comp as well allows the Particle Illusion particles to respond to that camera. So they're going to move with everything else in the comp. Now one thing I did do, I didn't want dust all over the comp. I only wanted it to be illuminated in these areas. So in order to do that, I've used the lens flare back layer as a matte for the dust particles. If you have a look down here, you can see in After Effects I've used the set matte effect. And for the matte, I've chosen lens flare back. And I've also chosen effects and masks. Otherwise, the set matte effect wouldn't recognize the lens flare effect applied to that layer. Now if we turn this on, there's not very many of them, but now we're getting little dust particles visible in these brighter areas, which is really nice. It makes sense because if it's a dark comp and there's only certain lights illuminating that comp, then you're only really going to see the dust when it moves into the light, right? A really nice little drifting dust effect. And to give it a little more depth, I duplicated that dust layer, and you can see it's almost the same, except for this I've used Sapphire's rack defocus. Let's just turn that on. And you can see with the rack defocus, zoom right in. I might just actually even solo this. With Sapphire's rack defocus, I'm able to give this a really nice quick defocus look. So only a couple of those. And they're sitting in front of the text, and the dust back is sitting behind the text. So once again, using multiple layers and that kind of sandwich approach where we have particles moving behind the text and particles moving in front of the text increases the depth. And with another quick preview, you can see how all of these elements are working together. We've got those thick zigzag strokes in the background, sliding left and right. We've got the finer zigzag strokes, which are being displaced using the displacement map effect. And we've got the lens flare in the foreground, following along with the tracking sphere from Cinema 4D, and the background lens flare, the big soft one with the add blend mode. And that's also being used as a matte to reveal the dust particles both foreground and background. Plus we've got Sapphire film effect to give the overall grade, and Sapphire Ultra Glow as well. And not to forget the Boris Continuum LED effect in the background as well to give us these dots. Once that look was established, all I had to do was duplicate those layers and set up the other shots. Let me just unsolo these. So we've got shot 1. The only difference here is that the background has been slightly blurred, and I've increased the size of the LED dots. Let's come to the background layer. You can see I've used a little bit of rack defocus because I figured if the camera was up closer, these dots would be larger, and I just felt it worked better if they were slightly out of focus as well. That really flattens everything, but with them slightly out of focus, it gives it a bit more depth. But other than that, all of the same layers. The same for shot 2, and shot 3 hasn't been done yet, so I thought we could do that right now. And this is generally how I would work when I'm creating anything like this, where I've developed the overall look, and then I have to duplicate that in other parts of the comp. So let's do that. A lot of this will just be simple duplication. Now I might just select the layers that I want. 1, 2, 3. I've got my camera in there already. And I need lens flare front, lens flare back, that one, and that one. So I need to duplicate those, Control D. I'm going to slide them across like that. Control Alt or Command Option up arrow, just to move those up. I'll move them up to the top, just like that. So it looks a little wrong at the moment. So first of all, need to bring the rendered text in between the lens flares. Like that, that's good. And film effect is fine, it's just an adjustment layer. Ultra glow is fine. Dust front, where does that actually does sit at the front, that's good. Obviously we have to change the matte. Now, I've got to choose lens flare back 2. Same for dust back. Lens flare back 2, probably could name those better. And these are the tracking sphere renders for camera 2. I need the ones for camera 3. So I'm going to just select those. And come into my source. I haven't imported them yet, so I'll just quickly import those. I'll bring that in as a PNG sequence. There we go. So I'll press Control Alt or Command Option / just to switch those out. Just solo this and turn off the lens flare. There we go. There's the tracking dots, the tracking spheres. So that's recognized that that layer has changed and it's automatically tracking those dots. It makes that so super simple. Let's just check out the background as well. So this is zigzag thick camera 2. Of course, I need to use camera 3 in here, so I'll just quickly grab camera 3. Let's copy that, paste it into here, and I'll bring that back to the start like that. Delete camera 2. And I'm going to get an error message because I used an expression to link that to the camera. So let's just go into 4 views. And what we'll do is press P. Currently, just while this open, this is linked to camera 2 and camera 2 doesn't exist. So we'll just change that to camera 3. That fixed that now. So now that, just zoom in here, now the spotlight is linked to the position of the camera. It needs a slight rotation though, because it's a 1-node camera, but it's a 2-node light. This is a spotlight, so it has a point of interest. If we just press AA, just to reveal the light options. Actually, I need to scroll that back up again, and I need to reveal the transform, sorry. Now, if I grab the point of interest, I could just do that. What I want to do is kind of just line it up with the camera. I could probably do this with an expression, but I think it's a bit of overkill. You can see it up here in the active camera. I just want to bring that point of interest. Probably better to do it there. There we go, something like that. So just creating that vignette style that the other shots have. Okay, so everything looks as expected. That ultraglow might be a little bit bright on the top of that text. I'll just do a few tweaks and we'll take a look at the final render. Okay, so I've gone ahead and made those modifications, and here's the final render. So once again, the combination of Cinema 4D with After Effects using Boris Effects Sapphire and Continuum has given us a really great result. So thanks again for watching. To learn more about Boris Effects Master Suite or to download a demo, be sure to visit boriseffects.com.